The night the city marked my house unsafe, nobody knocked like a neighbor. They rolled up quiet, 2 trucks idling curbside in the sodium orange light, a cluster of jackets with reflective tape and clipboards, and the kind of silence people wear when they already decided who you are. One of them peeled a fluorescent sticker from a fat roll as if it were a Band-Aid. He pressed it crooked across my front door. The glue hissed on the wood as if it wanted this more than I did. He smoothed it with the heel of his palm and took a step back. The thing glowed, unsafe, like a word you never want strangers to say about your home. I watched from the dark of the little hallway, my hand on the frame to steady the heat running through me. The hall smelled like cedar shavings and lemon oil because I'd cleaned my shells after dinner, not because I expected a procession. My house is adobe, real adobe, that sweats dust the color of toast when the monsoon wind kicks grit under the door, that remembers the heat of the day and gives it back to you at night. The walls felt warm at my shoulder. The sticker looked like it had been cut for some other place, some other story. It didn't fit the way a lie never quite fits, even when it's printed straight. They photographed the sticker and each other and the facade, the way people photograph a wedding, proof it happened. They spoke in short pieces like radio talk. A man in a charcoal jacket glanced up the block where the freight line sleeps behind chain link and razor wire, and the far-off hum of I-25 tucked a soft blade under everything. He never once looked toward my window, which told me he knew I was there. When they were done, nobody said goodnight. They left the street as if they'd never been there. The last taillight turned the corner at Santa Fe Avenue, and the darkness fell back into itself. I stood for a while, listening for a neighbor's door or a footfall, some sign someone else had seen, and it wasn't just me and the sticker. The only sound was the wind flipping the edge of a yard sign across the street. It read, "Vote early." The corner of it knocked the post like a metronome, measuring nobody's song. I am Delilah Mae Carter. I cleaned the rail cars for 34 years until the joints in my hands grew stubborn. I can thread a needle in a shaken train car and quilt a story into squares until it remembers who it is. I know the sound of a lie when it creaks in a doorway. I opened the door at midnight and read the sticker by porch light. It said condemnation was pending. It cited a code that read like a ghost had written it with a ruler. It declared my century-old kitchen a hazard. It warned me that entry was prohibited. It offered a hotline in case I wanted to ask permission to live in my own place. I pulled the sticker's left corner and felt the glue fight me. I let it win. In the morning, I told myself I'd handle the city like you handle a burned pot. Soak it overnight and the char gives up easier. I went to bed with the hall light on. At dawn, the paper showed up late, and the morning sun broke across the ridge with the slow gold that makes the city look like it forgives. I put on a robe and stood on the step with my coffee and looked at the sticker the way I'd look at a bruise to guess if it would bloom or fade. My neighbor's dog, a squat blue heeler with a scarred ear, watched me from the side yard like he had been placed there as a witness. When the 8 o'clock bus sighed to a stop at the corner, a man in a suit got out and walked past my house without his eyes ever stopping. He smelled like something expensive and temporary. By 9, my daughter came, which meant bad news had moved faster than good. She parked her small silver car in the exact spot I asked her never to park because it tears up the gravel. She watched herself in the rear view as she pressed her lips, as if the street needed to see her arrive ready. She is 34, and her name is Sloan, and she is the age now that I was when I thought I had more time to learn how to be a mother than I did. She climbed the steps with the folder tucked against her side like it could feel shame, and then she saw the sticker and stopped and let something pass across her face that wasn't sadness exactly, and wasn't victory either. It was a face that said, "I knew before you did." "Mom," she said. She used the voice people used when they intend to deliver you through your own trouble, the kind that never once checked if you wanted delivering. I let her inside and made new coffee because that is what a mother does even when she's an accused person in her own house. She set the folder on the table like a small coffin. She didn't sit until I did. I got the notice last week. I was hoping we can handle it quietly. I wanted to be here when you got the official posting. Quiet for whom? I asked.
For you, of course, she said, which is a phrase I have learned often means for someone else. She is a junior associate at Sun Mesa Development. They are the people who say revitalization because they never use words that admit what they want. Her boss is a man named Graham Leeds. He wears shirts the color of out-of-state money, and he does not eat the church enchiladas at the fundraiser when he comes for a photograph. I met him once at the Rail Yards open house, where the city brought banners to hang beside rusting cranes and made speeches under exit signs. Sloan snapped the folder clasp. "You can fight this," she said, "but I think we should be smart about it. There is a temporary guardianship we can file, not permanent, just to make sure you're not exploited by all this chaos, to manage the repairs, to speak with one voice to the city. It's standard. It could actually speed the process." "I know how to be my own voice," I said. "I've been my own voice all this time." She smiled the way people smile when they are sure a negotiation will end where they want it to. "I'm trying to help," she said. "It's dangerous, Mom. You have wiring from the 70s and that window frame with the rot. You have that heater that coughs. If the city wants to clear the block, they will do it. You can get ahead of it if you position yourself right." I looked around my kitchen. The paint was chipped in that way stories chip. The heater coughs, yes. The window frame is a scar I know by touch. But the danger here wasn't heat or wood. I knew what it was because I have been poor in a city that doesn't think it is. Who posted the sticker? Code enforcement, sure, but who called them? "It doesn't matter who," she said, which is the other phrase that means it matters. "I have 14 days to vacate. Did you know that, or did the sticker hide it from you like it hid it from me?" She swallowed, so she had read it. "Mom, let's not get defensive. If we file guardianship, I can handle the negotiations and the sale, if that is where it goes. And in the interim, you can stay with me." "Sale," I said. The word moved through my kitchen the way a drunk staggers, bumping everything it touches. She straightened. "The rail district is changing. You don't have to see that as a war. We can leverage." "I have a friend who can come look," I said. "He knows the city's form letters better than you do. He reads what they mean when they say what they don't, and I will not sign a guardianship, not to help you get a leverage." Her eyes hardened in that way I recognized from a day I wish I could forget. There is a truth there, I will say plain. When she was 19, she stood in this same kitchen and told me she would not be the daughter I thought I had. I told her I had not asked her to be. We both threw the same words like they were dishes, and that was the day we became careful with each other. We never fixed it, the way a tire is never exactly round again after it's patched. We rode anyway. She closed the folder with 2 fingers and walked to the door. "If you won't let me help responsibly, the city will push you around. I won't watch that." "You won't have to watch it," I said. "I'll be the one in it." She put the folder under her arm like a spare rib and walked to the door. "I will come back," she said. And she said it like a promise and a threat at once, because it was. After the door closed and the sticker stared at me with that printed confidence, I dialed a number on a scrap of paper I kept taped inside my cupboard. It was written in blue pen, smudged at the edges from steam. I had met the boy whose number it was because he almost hit me with a skateboard on the sidewalk last spring and then apologized so hard you would have thought he invented gravity. "Mateo," I said when he picked up. "It's Miss Carter. How much does it cost to ask a question?"
He said, "For you, only the cost of me feeling important for 5 minutes."
He came over in a hoodie that had seen too many afternoons and hair that was still damp from the shower. He is 16. He made me call him by his first name, and he called me Miss Carter no matter how many times I told him Delilah would do. He brought a laptop with stickers on it that said things I did not understand. Civic Tech, open records, sunshine is disinfectant. He laid it on my kitchen table like a medic puts down a kit. "You got hit with an 817 nuisance abatement," he said after he read the door and the paper I pulled from under the magnet on the fridge. Classic. "What's classic?" I asked. "Because when you're a woman of my age and people say the word as if everyone knows, you ask, even if they sigh at you for it." "The city declares a pattern of calls," he said. "Someone logged like 8 complaints about overgrowth, unsafe porch, suspicious activity, peeling paint. That builds a data pile. Once it's big enough, they can act. The complaints don't even have to be true, just consistent. People hired to be consistent can be very good at it." "And who would be hired?" I asked. He shrugged. "There's a PR firm that does AstroTurf for Sun Mesa. They run public input for hearings. They file letters of support for revitalization from names like Jane from the Rail District, who, if you look close, are a Gmail farm 5 states away. Those letters say things like, 'I've lived here for decades and it's time we make our streets safe and clean again.' I treat those like spam. Learn the pattern, block the sender." "You can find who filed?" I said, "even if they hid?" "I can try," he said. "I can request the call logs and IP addresses under the Inspection of Public Records Act. FOIA for us is IPRA, but FOIA sounds cooler on TikTok, so that's what everyone says. Give me a few days. Also, you might want to call the housing clinic at St. Teresa's. Miss Ruthie there eats city letters for breakfast. I've eaten worse for breakfast. Grits when there wasn't time to cook 'em right." He grinned. "I'll come back with receipts." He left me with quiet that felt like it had a heartbeat. I did my laundry and wiped my counters and took down a quilt I'd been working on and laid it over 2 chairs to see if the border needed more burgundy. The center block is a rail car like the ones I used to clean, stitched with thread too thin for most people to see. I sat there until I felt the thing that always finds me when I am still. The warm weight of memories that arrive like stray cats and sit where they want. At 3, my doorbell rang. I opened it to a woman my age in black slacks with a binder so thick it needed 2 rings to hold it. She wore her hair like a helmet and her patience like a suit of armor. "You're Delilah," she said. "I'm Ruthie Valdez. I run the clinic at St. Teresa's. Mateo says you are a woman who keeps her receipts." "He is a boy who thinks every fight can be won with a spreadsheet," I said. "Come in." She sat at the table and opened the binder and slid out a tab that said in block letters, "Abatement Scripts." She tapped it with a finger with a silver ring on it. "They try certain things first," she said. "The sticker, a certified letter with a deadline calculated for a Friday so you can't reach anyone until Monday. A walkthrough with an inspector who speaks in words that clip the corners off your sentences so you feel like you don't belong in the language anymore. Then they offer help that is really control. Who's your person who came with the help folder?" "My daughter," I said. "It had guardianship papers." Ruthie nodded once. "They like that one," she said. "Nothing looks more kind than a protective shell where your voice goes to die." "I don't intend to die," I said. "Not quiet and not here." "Good," she said. "I brought a form to file for a continuance. That buys you time. We'll schedule our own inspection. I know a contractor who understands that a note on a clipboard is not a law of nature. We'll fix what actually needs fixing. The city inspector can write a poem about the rest and send it to someone who cares."
I made her tea. We talked about the heater and the window frame and which outlets would need an upgrade so the city could not pretend my toaster was a felony. We made a list with small boxes next to each item and the satisfaction of a pencil when it makes a square go dark. When we were done, she closed the binder and laid her palm on it like a benediction. "You will also need a story," she said. "I have a story. It's older than their forms." "I mean, you will need to tell it where it hurts so they can't say you do not exist." That night, the wind lifted the sticker's corner and then lay it down again, as if the house was breathing. I slept with the window cracked. The city lights pooled the way they do when it is dry for too long. Somewhere down the block, a man coughed like a machine trying to start. In the morning, Ruthie took me to the clinic. The clinic is not a clinic like doctors. It is a clinic like justice. It lives in a church basement with cinder block walls painted the color of surrender and a folding table that has seen so many storms it has grooves like an old riverbed. There were people already waiting, a woman with a baby on her lap and a letter in her hand, a man whose face had learned to calculate before it showed anything, a couple who kept touching each other's sleeves every time papers moved, as if to say, "We are still here." "Sign in," Ruthie said to me like I hadn't signed my own name for 6 decades. She brought me a clipboard and a pen, and then, because she is not actually a general, she touched my arm and squeezed it, and the warmth of that kindness traveled farther than the pressure. At a little before noon, a man I had met once before walked in, and I felt my back stiffen just because it remembered. Graham Leeds wore blue today, which is what you wear when you want to act like you belong to the sky. He did not look toward the posters on the wall or the flyer for the tamale fundraiser. He went straight to Ruthie with a smile that would make a judge want to pay his own parking tickets. "Miss Valdez," he said, "always a pleasure." "This isn't a social club," she said. "State your business." "I came to offer assistance," he said. "Sun Mesa's Community Liaison Fund is growing. We are offering micro grants for home repairs that will keep residents safe and in place." "Name one," she said. "I beg your pardon," he said. "Name one resident you kept in place," she said. "First and last, block, and cross street." He smiled again, like the light in the room had somehow gotten brighter just because he stood there. He said, "We are in early days," he said, "but the intention here is very clear." "I can see your intention," Ruthie said. "It's in your loins, not your wallet. Get out of my clinic." I laughed, which I did not do on purpose. The laugh broke something in the room, and everyone else smiled a little because people like seeing a rich man catch a gate in the face. Leeds turned toward me as if he had been looking for me the whole time and just now remembered. "Miss Carter," he said, "I'm sorry about your door."
"I'm sorry about your shirt," I said. "It looks new." Sometimes I let my mouth go where my mother would tell me to keep it. She used to say, "You will say something that gets you hurt one day." I have. But I also learned that sometimes a truth said out loud lets you breathe easier, even if the world does not, which can keep you alive long enough to say the next one. Leeds left with the air he came in on. Ruthie glanced at me and shook her head once and grinned without joy, which is a face only certain women can make. "I thought I couldn't like you more," she said. "Turns out I can." 3 days later, Mateo came back with a backpack and a look like he was walking into his own birthday party. He set his laptop down and opened a folder on the screen filled with files that looked to me like snow. He pointed to one. "This is the call log for complaints on your address," he said. "I got it through IPRA. I asked for IP addresses of the online entries and phone numbers of the calls. Look here." I squinted at a string of numbers and dots. I nodded as if it were music I could feel, if not hear. 4 of the online complaints came from the same IP address, which resolves to an office in a building on Lomas, he said. And the phone calls? Same area code, different numbers, but the voicemail recordings they left all have the same script errors, like they're reading and then improvise the same way when they do not know what to say next.
You can hear pages shuffle at the same timestamp. "Whose office?" I asked. He grinned. "A firm called Apricity Partners. They handle public affairs for Sun Mesa. I got that off their pitch decks to the city. There's a PDF on the procurement page they forgot to hide. I also found letters filed to the zoning board from longtime residents in favor of cleaning up blight. The PDFs have the same metadata, created within the same minute on the same machine using a template titled Community Support Letter Final. I printed them for Ruthie, but for you, I brought the recordings because I want to see your face when you hear them." He hit play. A woman's voice came through the laptop speaker, in that tone people use when they want to sound offhand while reading a paper. "I live near the old rail yard. For years, that corner has been a mess. Trash, weeds, suspicious people. A woman who refuses help. The neighborhood deserves better." "That corner," I said. "She means me." "She means the version they sell of you," he said. He switched to the second file. The same voice, slightly different cadence, read the same words, and then faltered on the same line and restarted, and giggled once, a small breath sound when she said suspicious. He hit another. The sound of a page sliding across a desk scraped my kitchen. "Take me to Ruthie," I said. "My hands need to hold the paper while my heart learns how to talk." We took Ruthie the stack. She looked at the metadata and nodded like someone who has learned to listen to the hidden parts of things. "We will not bring this to the city first," she said. "Bring it to a reporter. By the time the city learns to feel ashamed, the story needs to already be playing in their heads when they wake up." A young woman with a camera and a notebook met us under the mural by the playground. Her name was Camille Park, and she wrote for an alt weekly that survives on coffee and the fact that there is always a story someone tried too hard to hide. She is the age of my daughter and looked at me with the respect my daughter does not always remember to deliver. She listened without writing for a while, then asked specific questions with a voice that said she knew the difference between a rumor and a rope you can pull until the thing attached to it comes down. "Why are you telling this to me?" she asked me, finally, when the sun had shifted and the kids on the swings had lost interest in us. "Because I have been told this city is about stories," I said. "I am making sure mine isn't erased so someone can sell the house where it lived." She raised her camera and took a photo of my door with the sticker. She took one of my hands holding the letters as if they were a prayer book. She took one of the mural, a train engine stitched with vines, and one of me with Ruthie and Mateo that I could feel as she took it would one day be on a wall in some room I would never enter. Because that is how pictures travel when you say something true in a city that has forgotten what that is. Camille's story landed on a Friday morning. The photo on the front made my house look like it had been caught doing something innocent. The headline said, "The Rail District's Quiet Displacements." It read like a bell. It said what we had been saying, but to people who had to hear it. By 10, my phone had 15 messages from numbers I didn't know, and my porch had 2 women with a tray of green chili burritos and the names of their cousins who had the same sticker 2 blocks over. By noon, a man from the city called and said there would be a hearing. He used words like process and fairness as if saying them could make them real. I did not tell him that fairness has to be built like anything else, and the men who wear ties to the job never bring a hammer. By afternoon, a different call came. This one from my daughter. Her voice was smaller. It did not wear shoes. "You went to the press," she said. I went to tell a story as old as dirt, I said. The press came because dirt finally said hello. They put my firm's name in it, she said. My boss called me in and asked if I was proud to be famous for ruining a project. I'm not famous, I said. I am old. Don't be cute, she said. Her voice cracked on the word, and I felt how tired she was. They demoted me, Mom. I'm on compliance now, which is code for go sit in the corner. You could quit, I said, and I regretted it the instant I said it, because you cannot tell a woman to leap when she has lived her whole adult life by makeshift ladders. And do what? She said. Go back to the coffee shop and let people call me by the name their daughters called me in high school? You don't remember what it's like to be at the bottom and pretend you aren't? I remember better than you do, because I have not left. She didn't answer. We listened to the same silence for a few seconds. Then she said, they are going to accelerate the abatement. They'll make you leave sooner to show they can't be bullied. And one of my cousins from your side filed a guardianship petition today with the court. He says you need protection. Which cousin? I asked. Earl, she said. Earl who borrows money at funerals, I said. They found him because he has your last name and no shame. She says he gets a fee if it goes through. Then it will not go through, I said. You tell your boss this. When I was 22, a supervisor told me there was a line between the women who kept their heads down and the ones who forgot who owned them. I told him the line he was pointing at was a string, and he didn't know I knew how to cut. Her breath caught. She said, don't turn me into the boss, so softly I almost missed it. You turned yourself into him when you brought me the folder. But you can turn back. People have. She hung up. I stood with the phone in my hand like it could explain my daughter to me. It did not. The next day, a city inspector came with a man carrying the clipboard who wasn't an inspector. He wore a branded jacket with Sun Mesa stitched over his heart as if they'd planted it there. They asked to do a walkthrough. I opened my door and stayed 2 steps ahead of them as if I owned the place. The inspector took notes in a measured way, the way people write when they want to say they were present but not responsible. The Sun Mesa man slid his fingers along my windowsill as if dust were a moral failing. You'll want to upgrade this electrical, the inspector said of my kitchen outlets. We can handle that, I said. Safety matters to me. So does sense. We'll do what is needed, not what is inventable. Your porch steps are out of code, the Sun Mesa man said, as if he had found a necklace of crimes. They are out of code because the code changed. Nothing else did. We will add a rail. I will paint it turquoise for you so you can tell people it is Santa Fe style. He didn't laugh. He ticked a box and moved on. When they were done, I asked for their names. The inspector gave his immediately. The Sun Mesa man hesitated and then said, Tom. I asked Tom what his last name was. He spelled it as if he was dropping crumbs. I wrote it down and smiled in that way that says, I am not the one who will forget you. Ruthie's contractor came that afternoon with 2 kids who looked like they were learning to be men badly and quickly the way men often do in the summer. They replaced the outlet with a line that hummed. They added the rail and did not let me pay them until they tried to, and then I paid them anyway, plus tamales, because I do not feed men only what they expect.
That night, after a day of lists, I unrolled my quilt on the sidewalk. I set a card table and spread out my squares, crimson and slate and a soft yellow that makes you squint to see the way joy does. I put a sign next to the board with my prices, low because I have never learned to charge what time is worth. Then I pulled a chair and began to stitch in the open as the evening came down and the street lights hissed awake and a kid on a scooter circled and circled as if he could figure out how to beat gravity if he kept trying. People stopped and talked and told me their mothers used to quilt or their grandmothers did and that they wished they'd learned. I told them it wasn't too late for anything except what you let be. A man with a high-vis vest walked by and nodded at me and said nothing, which I took as a benediction. Big Henry came at 9 with a 6-pack of lemonade and a grin that takes up half of a face and a voice big enough to carry a choir. He worked the tracks with me back when my knuckles could still play piano on a steel rail, and he never learned to do anything quietly. He hugged me and lifted me off the ground like I weighed less than the stories I told him. He sat on my porch and drank lemonade and told me he'd gotten his union people talking.
They'll tell the council they know what safety and blight and all that are, he said, because the men who lay rail know what a city wants to become. We see it from ground level, not from a drone. I nodded because some truths you just let be true. By Monday, a postcard arrived from the court. The guardianship hearing would be in 2 weeks. It would be a Tuesday morning, when work makes most people choose between wages and their own lives. The zoning board hearing, by coincidence that does not feel like coincidence, would be the same week, Thursday night, in a room that smells like dry erase markers and a history you can wipe clean. Mateo worked like a boy learns to when he discovers his hands can throw light. He sat at my table and taught me how to read a PDF secrets. "See this?" he said, and he pointed to author, apricity staff. And then he pointed to created 4:07 p.m., modified 4:10 p.m. And he grinned the grin of a boy who just picked a lock on a box that said someone else's name on it. "Print every one," Ruthie said. "We're going to hand the board their own conscience in a manila envelope." Camille came back twice, then 3 times. She wrote a follow-up. The city responded, which means they said words that children once wrote on a wall at school while their teacher watched and pretended not to know. "We take all allegations seriously. We prioritize safety. We encourage community engagement." The city attorney requested to see our documents. Ruthie told him he could see them at the hearing when everyone else did. Sloane came one evening with her shoulders like someone had tried to pull them off her with pliers. She did not carry the folder this time. She carried a bag with takeout from a place with plates made to look like they were from the 1950s and a bill that tried to be the 2020s. She set the food on my table without a word and opened the cartons, and we ate beans and a wedge salad with too much dressing and enchiladas that tasted like concession. Then she said, "I have something to tell you." "Then tell it," I said. "They asked me to draft the talking points for the hearing. I did it because it was my job. We are going to say that displacement is a myth and that Sun Mesa has invested millions in the community. We are going to say we have a repair fund for residents. We do not yet. The talking points say we do. I told them we should not say that. They told me to put it in anyway and call it aspirational language." I took a long time before I spoke. "You could print the draft," I said finally. "You could bring it to me. We could show it." She laughed a small laugh that scared me because it sounded like a bark from someone who had been hit too many times with the same stick. "If I do that, I will never work in this town again," she said. "You think that is punishment. It is for me. I built everything on the idea that I could prove something to people who did not know me. Her eyes grew wet, and then anger found them before tears did. And you, she said, built everything around the idea that the people closest to you will eventually learn how to love you the way you want. That is not true, I said. It is, she said, and I am sorry I am not that person. But I cannot be your daughter and the person who saves you and the person who saves herself all at once. I am not strong like that. You are strong like something else, I said. What is that? She asked. You are strong like someone who admits the truth even when she thinks it fractures the last piece of what is holding her up, I said. You do not know it yet, but I do. She stared at me and then looked away because that is what women do when they don't want to cry. She put her hand on the table like it needed anchoring. If I am at the hearing and they ask me to lie, I don't know if I can do it, but I also don't know if I can say it out loud. There are other ways to say, I said. You can sit in the front row and look at me. You can bring a friend who will tweet the words you cannot. You can leave your chair when they say aspirational language, and you can let the door say your words for you when it clicks behind you. She closed her eyes. I hate how you make me want to be good. I have been practicing being mean long enough to earn a pension. Practice something else, I said. You are not too old to learn a new trick. Tuesday came and the guardianship hearing looked like a wedding in a room that forgot it was supposed to be holy. Earl stood in a short-sleeved shirt with a tie that looked like it hid a stain and told the judge I needed a firm hand because I had lost the thread of reality. The judge asked me when he last had dinner with me. He said Thanksgiving 2 years ago. He forgot it was a potluck at my neighbor's house and he ate half a pie before anyone else arrived and never once washed a dish. Ruthie spoke and said that my mind was fine, and so was my mouth, and that I could recite back code sections with better accuracy than a man who files the papers for a fee. The judge looked at me over the top of reading glasses and asked me who the president was, and I told him a name and told him he should ask me harder questions if he intended to insult me. He smiled without meaning to and denied the petition. Earl didn't come shake my hand afterward because he had already left.
Thursday night, the zoning board hearing filled before the gavel hit. It was held in a long room with a dais that made people taller and a projector screen that made lies look as big as courage. Men in suits talked to each other as if the rest of us were waiting for our bus. People who live here fanned themselves with the agenda. A woman from a church 2 blocks away brought a Tupperware of cookies she passed out like communion. Big Henry filled a row with Union jackets the color of fresh paint. The city attorney sat near the front and looked like he was cramming for an exam with notes that never seemed to end. Sun Mesa spoke first. Graham Leeds wore dark the way men do when they want to be looked at but not seen. He used the word partnership so many times I thought it might file a harassment claim. He said revitalization with a soft Z, fresh from a marketing deck. He said safety so often I thought he might not have never felt it himself and was trying to conjure it by repetition. A woman I did not know from their team read letters from longtime residents who wanted the block cleaned up. People shifted in their seats like a storm was coming. Sloane sat at the side of the room, near the aisle, her back straight, her face careful. When the woman read a line that said, "I have raised my children here and I want them to be able to ride their scooters without fear," I watched Sloane's eyes flick to me as if she wanted to say a thing and didn't have the muscles to lift it. When our turn came, Ruthie walked to the lectern with a binder and a stack of prints and the confidence of someone who has spent more hours in rooms like this than the men who thought they owned the table. She said her name and watched them learn how to spell it. She says she represented the clinic and then said she represented herself and then said she was also representing the idea that people should not have to represent anything to mean something. Then she handed the board a set of documents that looked like ordinary paper until you read them and found your own reflection. These are letters to your office. If you click Properties, you will find the computer that created them. If you check their timestamps, you will find they are not, in fact, separate expressions of community will, but one expression repeated by one hand, sent from one machine. Here are call logs. Look at the IP addresses. You will see the same office. You can ignore the smell if you want, but some smells sit in your clothes. Mateo moved to the projector like he had been waiting all his life to be this useful. He clicked and the screen filled with metadata. The words author and created and modified glowed like a confession you had to read out loud to understand. The board members leaned forward because they had expected a story and got math. The city attorney took a breath through his nose that sounded like he wasn't prepared to feel anything in public, and then did. They tried to fight. The Sun Mesa lawyer stood and said something about interns and mess-ups, about deadlines and assistants and poorly trained staff. He said any pattern was coincidence. He said anyone could pull such logs and make them say anything. He smiled at me like he thought if he looked kind, I would become soft, like bread you can push down with a thumb.
I walked to the microphone because it was my turn. I did not bring papers. I brought my voice and a steady heart. I said my name and my address and how long I had slept in the bedroom that faces the alley where sparrows throw themselves against the morning. I said I cleaned trains and raised a daughter and buried a husband and stitched quilts that look like maps when the light hits them proud. I said I am not a blight. I said I have given this house more of myself than any spreadsheet will ever carry. I said if the city decides to teach the future how to act by how it treats the past, we will deserve the kind of people we train. I said, if you want to talk about safety, come sit on my porch at 10 at night and watch who watches out for whom. I said, more softly, that people who call you suspicious when you live in your own house must not have a house worth living in. I looked at Sloan then because I needed to know if she could stand it. Her jaw worked. She did something I did not expect. She stood and left the room. The door clicked as if the room had said what she could not. I am not a woman who cries in public if I can help it, but I felt something stalwart in me shift, like a bone sets itself quietly when you finally stop lying about whether it is broken. The board voted to freeze the project. They referred the matter to the city attorney to investigate the legitimacy of the public comment record. They paused enforcement against my house pending a review. People exhaled what they had not let themselves breathe for weeks. The cookies were gone. The union men clapped, and the sound filled the room with the kind of bass that makes decisions feel heavier. Outside, under the sodium lamps, Sloan waited at the bottom of the stairs. Her eyes were swollen, but her mouth looked like a woman's who has said something to herself that counts. She put her hands in her pockets and took them out and then put them back in like the pockets had asked her to. She said, I couldn't sit there. They were going to ask me to speak and say things that were wrong. I told Graham to let someone else talk. He told me to remember who pays my rent. I said I remember. I said I also remember that my mother taught me to sew. He said that had nothing to do with it. I said everything has to do with everything. Come home, I said. Eat food that isn't a metaphor. She smiled, the tiniest smile she has, the one I could put in my pocket to take out when I forget what it looks like on her. We went home, we ate cereal and sliced bananas, we sat on the steps and listened to the stickers that weren't on doors flutter on signs and the way a city makes a sound when it thinks about becoming gentler. The next week, something happened that took the breath out of my chest and put it back in all at once. Ruthie and Henry and Mateo and I met a woman from a nonprofit who had seen the story and wanted to talk about a community land trust. She said words like land banking and permanent affordability, and I said words like home and forever, and somehow they meant the same thing in the space between us. The idea was this: we would form a trust, buy the land under my house and the houses next to it, and put it into a community-controlled organization with a board that included people who live here. The houses could be owned or rented, but the land would stay the community's, which meant the speculative hunger that had been walking our block would starve a little. I had never started an organization before. I had started meals on a hot plate and marriages that needed more than I had to give, and a daughter who required more truth than I knew how to cut into small enough pieces. This felt like that, but with paper and neighbors and a bank. We did it with potluck food and bylaws that sounded like they were written in good faith, which is a dialect people forget. We made a board. Ruthie was on it, and Henry, and a nurse whose husband fixes bikes on their sidewalk and charges children in dollars when he can and in thank yous when he can't. They asked me to be on the board. I said yes, and then cried in the church bathroom because there is something about being asked that makes you remember the times you were not. Sloan asked if she could do anything. I said yes, she could attend the next meeting with a notepad and no power. She nodded. She did not flinch when I said no power. We wrote a letter to the city requesting discounted land and tax credits and the chance to prove a different story. The city did not say yes immediately. It also did not say no. It asked us for a business plan, like hope is something you should attach pricing to. We gave them one. We told them we would acquire 3 parcels by winter, and we would fix roofs and hysteria in equal measure. I signed my name on paper. I did not have to pretend believed me. Then the investigation began, and the city attorney came by to ask me things in a voice that made him sound less like an institution and more like a man who gets colds and needs soup. He took copies of the documents. He took our timeline. He took Mateo's list of metadata like it was a relic. He thanked us and said he would be in touch, as if he knew the phrase made us laugh inside. I watched him cross the street and tuck his folder under his arm when the wind picked up and thought, maybe the city is not a person. Maybe it is us. Weeks later, an email came to all of us at once. The city announced that Sun Mesa's application was suspended pending review. The week after that, APRA City Partners put out a press release saying they had cut ties with Sun Mesa because of differences in ethical approach, which is a thing people say when they smell smoke and pretend they are the ones putting it out. The week after that, my daughter sent me a text that said simply, "I resigned." I wrote back, "You didn't resign. You changed your job description." She came over with 2 suitcases and the same bag with takeout. This time, she cooked. She made eggs scrambled with green chili the way I had taught her to make them, a little too soft. She said she'd applied for a fellowship for community organizing. She said she would not get it because the panel would see her old boss's name on her resume and decide she was a spy. I told her spies have to be trusted at least once to do any good. She told me not to make everything into a story. I told her everything is a story. She asked if she could sleep in the small bedroom for a while, the one with the quilt I made in 1987 when I learned to buy batting that didn't fall apart in the wash. I said yes, of course, and felt something inside me sigh. The long sigh you only hear when you finally put down a thing you were sure you could carry forever. That night, after she fell asleep, I walked the house in bare feet, and the floor told me what it always tells me, the list of small creaks and groans that make up the sound a home makes when it decides not to leave. I checked the sticker and found the wind had finally tugged the corner enough that you could see the paint underneath. I did not pull it. I wanted the city to take it down themselves, to feel the glue on their fingers.
In the morning, Ruthie called and said, "You ready to get famous again?" And I laughed, because fame here means you're going to stand in front of a small group of people who brought their own chairs and say something true. We held a neighborhood meeting on the lot next to Miss Lorraine's place, the one with the mesquite that drops pods like pencils. We brought a projector and a sheet. Mateo ran an extension cord from a neighbor with the kind of trust that runs only in one direction for a while. We showed slides, the idea of the trust, the numbers that added to a math I finally understood, photos from other places where people had decided to hold the ground long enough to plant something in it besides sorrow. We asked people to sign on as members. They did. We promised something simple. No magic, just work. A week later, my father's cousin Earl came to my door. He stood on my steps and removed his hat like the air had told him he couldn't wear it here. He looked like a man who had discovered what loneliness feels like when it is no longer a choice.
"I was wrong," he said. He did not look at my eyes when he said it, which meant he meant it, maybe for the first time in his life. "I know," I said. "I got a call from a man who said we could make some money," he said. "I did not think it would mean what it meant." "You did not think because thinking is hard when you are hungry," I said. "But look at me when you say sorry, or take it back to whatever hole you found it in and bury it where it won't grow." He looked at me. "I am sorry," he said. "I will testify if anyone asks. I will tell them I filed that paper for a fee and I did not care what it did to you. And I will say that shame is heavy and makes sleep shallow." "Good," I said. "If you want to do more, come to the next meeting. You can stack chairs. That is where the work is." He nodded. He tucked his hat back on. He stepped away from my house like it belonged to him again, the space in front of it, at least. Sometimes that is what home is, a place where you can imagine yourself leaving and arriving without getting lost in the middle. Not everything became perfect, because it never does. There were days when the bank man looked at us like we were children with monopoly money and hunger for candy. There were days when the city people forgot to copy us on emails and then explained it was an oversight. There were mornings when I woke at 5 because my old habits walked before sunup and wondered whether the trust would ever own even a square of sidewalk. There were afternoons when I wanted to fight someone in a tie. There were nights when Sloan came home with her face set and her hand shaking because someone had told her she was a traitor or a fool or both. On one such night, she sat at the table and said, "Do you ever get tired of being right?" And I said, "I get tired of being loud." And she laughed because it was not funny, and that made it exactly the right thing to say. Camille wrote another story, this one about the trust, and she titled it, "We Decided to Stay." The photo shows me and Ruthie and Mateo and Henry and Miss Lorraine and a boy whose name I never learned holding shovels in a lot that looked like it had been waiting for us. The comments online were a mix, the way they always are. Some people said we were stubborn and in the way of progress. Some said we were saints. Some said nothing because they have learned that silence can be a weapon or a wound. We worked anyway. I had not seen Leeds until the day he stood on the sidewalk opposite my house, with his hands in his pockets and his gaze on my door like a man who has lost track of his own address. He did not walk across. He did not call out. He looked, and I looked back, and I thought, he has the kind of tired that comes when you run out of places to put your explanations. He left. I did not feel triumph. I felt a small ache for a man who believed the good he was doing would come if he just learned to say the right words in the right order to the right people. I know that ache. I have felt it and tried to stuff it into a drawer with the old bills. One Sunday morning, I found a letter slid under my door, addressed to me in careful writing. Inside, there was a sheet of paper. It said, "I am sorry." It was not signed. I do not know who wrote it. I burned it in a small dish in my sink, not because I am sentimental, but because some words are meant to change state before they can mean what they need to mean. Spring came with wind and the smell of damp earth and the way the light in this city flips from cold to warm in a breath. The trust bought its first parcel, a corner lot with a house so small the word struggled to stretch enough to fit around it. We hosted a work day. People showed up with hammers and gloves and radios. Someone brought a griddle for pancakes. Children drew with chalk on the sidewalk, maps of the world the size of their lives. Sloan wore old Deans and a shirt from high school that still fit her the way hope fits when you remember you own it. She stopped working and stood beside me and said, "I want to say something." And I said, "Then say it." And she said, "I'm sorry for the day I brought the folder. I believed that paper could make us safer if we signed it, and I forgot who taught me how to make safe for real. I forgot you." "I didn't forget you," I said. "I know. That makes it worse. In a good way." We were quiet then, because quiet sometimes does more than words. She leaned her shoulder against mine, and the heat from her ran into me the way water from a hose runs into a gutter, fast, and in the direction meant for it. Summer burned. The trust filed 3 more closings. We hired an architect who did not use the word sleek in any sentence that included a home. We learned how to secure a grant and how to lose one and how to apply again anyway. We learned that you can buy the same door for $100 less if the box has been opened before. We learned to be patient, which I have always been, except when I am not.
On an afternoon with heat you could eat with a spoon, a deputy sheriff brought a notice. It was not for me. It was for Sloan. She took it with a face that had learned to anticipate impact. It said she was named in a civil complaint filed by Sun Mesa for breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation of proprietary information. Her shoulders fell and rose like a woman learning how to breathe through a new pain. "They are doing this because they can't fire me twice," she said. "We will find you a lawyer," I said. "I already called one," she said. "I called Camille and she gave me 3 names. She said this might make another story. I told her I hoped it wouldn't. I'm tired of being the reason people click." I took her hand there at the door with the sticker residue and the sun flattening shadows to nothing. "You are not a headline," I said. "You are my daughter." She squeezed back. "I'm both," she said. "It's horrible." The complaint did not last long. With the city sniffing around their files and our documents held high and our neighbors not going anywhere quietly, Sun Mesa decided to lower the temperature of their war. The suit was withdrawn without apology. Sloan breathed easier, and I watched the corners of her mouth relearn that they could lift. One evening in late August, she brought me a present. It was a frame with a quilt square inside, one I had given her as a teenager. And in the corner of the frame, she had mounted a tiny printed note, "Property of the Rail Yard Community Land Trust." I laughed at that because I knew what it meant. We had taken the thing they threw at us, paper, and turned it into a place where we could write our own names. We held a fundraiser in Miss Lorraine's yard. We drank lemonade from a cooler and ate beans with hot dog pieces in them, which taste like the truth no matter how your city decides to pronounce itself. We raffled off baskets with spices and a promise from Henry that he would help you move a couch when the day came. A band played a little out of tune because the heat makes strings swell. People smiled their names across the space between them because we had learned each other in rooms where learning someone else might be the only way to keep both of you whole. This is what I did not expect.
One day, my daughter and I stood in front of the house of a woman who had the sticker 2 blocks over. Her name is Marisol, and she is the kind of person who can speak 3 languages and make you feel understood in all of them. She had packed 2 bags and stacked them by the door because the city had told her it was time to go. We took the bags and set them down. We called Ruthie, who called the city lawyer, who called someone else who remembered it was an election year. The way the chain moved felt like a prayer someone had finally remembered to say. The sticker came off. The glue left a ghost. We took vegetable oil and a rag and rubbed until the ghost let go. After, Marisol hugged me and then hugged Sloan and then hugged me again because sometimes the thing you are grateful for is bigger than one body can hold. She said, I have 2 daughters. And I said, I do too. And we laughed because the math did itself. On a Saturday in September, when the light began to sharpen the way it does here right before the balloon festival balloons poke the sky like commas, I sat at my table with a stack of mail. There was a certified letter from the city. I opened it with a butter knife because some envelopes deserve violence. It said the nuisance order was lifted. It said the abatement was canceled. It said, thank you for your cooperation, which made me smile because I had not cooperated. I had insisted. I took the letter to my door. I peeled the sticker slowly. The glue fought and then gave. It came away in one long plastic sigh. I took it to my sink and folded it into itself until it was a square that could not stare at anyone ever again. That night, I quilted. I stitched a map of my block with thread the color of stubbornness. I sewed our lots and the alley and Miss Lorraine's cars and the mesquite and the place where the mural shows the train wrapped in vines. I stitched in tiny letters the initials of every person who had stood with me. I stitched a small square for Sloan that said MCS in script and made myself cry just looking at it. I stitched one for me, DMC. I held the quilt up and the lamplight turned it into a stained glass window for a faith that has no church.
We hung it on the wall of the new office of the trust, a small room that used to be a soap shop, on a nail hammered by Henry because he can hit a nail straight no matter what angle his arm is at. People came in and touched the fabric with hands that had learned to ask permission first. A child traced the lines with a forefinger and said, "This is where my grandma lives." And I thought, I could live forever if you let me have this one moment and then nothing else. When I sleep now, I dream less about stickers and more about doors. I dream about opening them and about others opening to me. Sometimes I dream about the rail yard, the cranes that do not move, the way steel looks under a full moon like something alive. Sometimes I dream about my mother, the way she taught me to fold a sheet with its corners facing heaven. Sometimes I dream about Sloan as a child and say out loud the apology I could not get to her then. I am sorry I taught you to be hard before I taught you to be soft. She forgives me in the dream because dreams know how to finish sentences we never got to speak. There is a thing people do when a story about a fight ends. They want a bow and a lesson and a final shot that makes them feel like the world is a machine you can fix with a good wrench. That is not what this is. Some days I feel tired in my bones like I swallowed lead. Some days I get mad at the neighbor who does not pick up his beer cans. Some days I answer a phone call I should have let go to voicemail because it comes from a number that carries 100 small betrayals. Some days the trust hits a wall that looks like a smile, and we have to take out pencils and make a door where there wasn't one. But there is this too. The days when the kids ride scooters on the sidewalk and nobody calls them suspicious. The mornings when the women in the houses meet in their yards with coffee and talk about tomatoes and bylaws like they are the same subject. The afternoons when my daughter sits on the step with me and tells me about a training she went to where they taught people how to translate a regulation into a sentence that keeps a person in their bed. The evenings when the light turns the block gold and the radios in the parked cars play different songs that somehow know how to be one song. Last week, Sloan handed me a small box. Inside was a ring. Not gold, not diamond, but silver, simple, with a small inlay of turquoise, the color of a clear thought. "It's for the board," she said. "Members to mark the first year. We got them donated. I wanted to give you yours." "I do not need a ring to know I belong," I said. And then I slipped it on and felt something inside me answer a question I had forgotten to ask. We had a meeting that night. We argued about whether to buy a lot with a house that leaned. We listened to each other the way only people who have learned how to love with limits can. We decided to buy it because the leaning had rights too, and we wanted to learn how to stand it up. After, we left the room in ones and twos and small clusters, walking into the night like we do, slowly because we wanted the walking to last. A boy ran past with a light on his scooter and shouted, "Hi, Miss Carter," and I shouted back, "Hi, world," which made Sloan laugh in that place that will always be 11 for me, even when she is 50 and I am a ghost. Sometimes, alone, I open a drawer and take out a note I keep. It is from Camille. It is printed on cheap paper because she works for a paper with more truth than budget. It says, "Thank you for not waiting for permission to be real." I slide the note back into the drawer because I don't like to leave it where it can get dust. It is a silly thing to preserve, but it is not silly to be seen. Tonight, I am making stew. Ruthie is bringing cornbread. Henry is bringing his laugh, which we will slice into pieces and share. Mateo is bringing a new laptop because the old one died from the kind of work that makes machines sweat. Sloan is bringing a pie she did not make, but bought from a woman at the farmer's market who makes crust the way my grandmother would have hugged me if she had been the hugging kind. We will eat. We will plan. We will say the names of people who are sick and people who moved and people who died and houses like ours because they could, which is the only thing I ever wanted for anyone I love. Before they come, I stand at the kitchen sink and peel apples. The light falls across the counter and makes dust visible in the air, and I think, this is what it looks like when a house decides to live. I think about the night the sticker went on, and the boy on the scooter, and the men with clipboards, and the daughter with the folder, and the newspaper, and the letters, and the room with the projector, and the way the city's face looked when it realized we were not going to be quiet. I think about my mother and my grandmother, and the women who came before them, whose names I know, and whose names I do not, because men did not always think to write them down. I say those names out loud, even the missing ones. I do this not because I am superstitious, but because the vibration of their names in my kitchen is nicer than the radio. When the doorbell rings, I wipe my hands and go to the door. I open it onto faces I know and faces I will learn. Behind them, the street glows and the sky puts on pink like a person getting ready for a party. If you stood at the corner and watched through your own secret, you might not see only a house with people going in and out. You might not see the thing I see. A map we made with our hands. A city you can carry in your pocket. A quilt stitched from squares of refusal and forgiveness, and the kind of love that dares to call itself plain. After dinner, after the plans, after the pie, and the joke about how I should trademark my green chili stew, after Ruthie says she's too old to be out this late and stays anyway, after Henry sings a few lines of a song he claims he made up and we all know he didn't, after Mateo shows us a website he built for the trust that looks like a door that won't shove anyone, after people leave with hugs and leftovers, I walk to the door and look at the place where the sticker was. The wood is bare there in a square. I can see the color of the original paint under the repaint. It is lighter, almost like new. I press my palm to it. The wood feels warm. For a moment, I imagine I can feel a heartbeat there. Maybe it is mine. Maybe it is the house. Maybe it is the block or the city, or the way a truth told long enough becomes a pulse separate from the body that made it. I leave my hand there until heat meets heat, and then I let go. I turn the lock. I go to bed. I sleep through the night with the window open to let the desert air talk to my curtains and the coyotes sing somebody else's blues. I wake once to the sound of a train horn down by the yards. It doesn't scare me. It reminds me. I pull the sheet up to my chin like a girl and whisper into the room for no one and for everyone. We're still here.
The next morning, I walk with Sloane to the corner where the bus stops because she likes to ride it when she can. We stand in the rectangle of shade a mesquite throws like charity. The bus pulls up and the driver waves like he knows us, which he does. She climbs on and turns back and says, "Love you," in a voice that is trying to learn how to say it like it has said it every day. I say it back in a voice that knows it has not and intends to. When the bus pulls away, I stand at the corner a minute longer, in no rush to go inside. A boy on a scooter zips by, his wheel lights turning the dawn into something you'd pay to see. He shouts something I don't catch. It sounds like a name. It might be mine. I wave anyway. The wind lifts a scrap of paper at the curb. It is not a sticker. It is a grocery list. Apples, flour, milk, hope. I smile at myself for the spell I put on that last one. I can be silly early in the day. It helps. At home, I make coffee. I take my quilt down and lay it across the table. I run my fingers over the stitches until I find the place that needs mending, a loop of thread that pulls a little when it shouldn't. I thread a needle with a piece of cotton hardly thicker than a hair. I push it through and pull it back and knot it where the knot disappears into the cloth. It is nothing and it is everything. I hold the quilt to the light and look through the thin places the way doctors look through lungs. I fold it and place it over the chair and feel the kind of satisfaction you get when you do a small thing right. Too many days teach you that the small things are all you get. Then, once in a while, you get the big thing, the one that carries others. Around noon, the mailman brings a fat envelope. It is from the bank we've been courting with cupcakes and spreadsheets. Inside is an approval letter. The trust can buy the second parcel. I laugh in the doorway, and the mailman laughs too because laughing is easier when it doesn't have to do anything else. I light a candle and say thank you, not to anyone in particular. I call Ruthie and Henry and Mateo and Sloane. I call Miss Lorraine and tell her to make room in her yard for another barbecue. I call my body to say, stay now. Stay long enough for the next one. In the afternoon, a cloud builds over the mesa and delivers a smudge of rain nobody promised. The scent of it comes down like a man laying a coat over a puddle for someone he loves in a movie. I step outside and let 2 drops hit my cheek, cool and almost polite. I think about the boy in the hoodie who brought me a laptop, and about the old woman with the binder who laid it like a Bible on my table, and about the man with the laugh big enough to lift me up without asking permission. I think about my daughter who tried to make a bridge out of a contract and discovered we need rope and hands.
I think about me, the me that thinks she can do everything alone and the me that knows she can't. I think about the city and how it is never a thing you can hold and always a thing you can make. Toward evening, there is a knock. I open the door and see a woman I do not recognize holding a casserole I will not be able to finish by myself. She says her name. She says she lives 2 streets over. She says she read the story. She says she wanted to bring something. I take the casserole and thank her and invite her in. She steps across the threshold like a person who has decided she will not ask permission to be real. We sit and talk. We become neighbors in the time it takes for a dish to cool. When she leaves, she says, "If you ever need anything," and I stop her and say, "I will." And she laughs because people say the words and then don't mean them, and here I am promising to. After she leaves, the house feels full in a way I cannot count. I walk to the front door. I look at the square where the sticker used to be. I stare at the way the paint looks like new under what was meant to be an end. I touch it with fingertips and quietly, because quiet is what this deserves. I say to the wood, "We did that." I do not pretend this is a fairy tale. The project is not over. There are men with briefcases gathering in rooms that smell like iced coffee and discontent. There are women making calls and being ignored and calling again and being heard. There are people moving trucks, and there are people who cannot move trucks because their trucks died years ago. There are lines at clinics and people who have learned to read and people who will never be taught the language of forms and still somehow will sign their names in a way that says, "I am here." Tonight before sleep, I will sit in my quiet living room and listen to the refrigerator hum and the air move and the distant roar of a freeway that will outlast me. I will imagine roads I have not walked. I will try to memorize the sound my daughter makes when she laughs at something that does not have any darkness in it. I will think about calling my mother's sister and telling her we won the day, even if the war will need us again tomorrow. I will let myself believe that winning is not a one-time event, but a practice, like quilting and like love. And when sleep comes, I will dream of a yard with cranes that stand against the sky like monuments to labor, and of a small woman walking under them with her head up and her hands empty because she has finally put down the load she carried long enough to lift something else. I will dream of mats stitched on cloth that tell a story that cannot be erased by a sticker. I will dream of a city that writes back when you write your name on it. I will dream, and in the dream we are still here, and when I wake, we are.